We'll start recording. All right. Welcome to the Emotional Mastery Podcast. Today I have Kurt Johnson, who is a manifestation coach, and I'm really excited to have this conversation. All things manifestation have sort of been coming into my world this year and really trying to understand it. And so I'm excited to dig into all things manifestation. So I'll hand the floor over to you for you to introduce yourself, tell your story, anything pivotal along the way that kind of got to where you are now, and we'll dive in from there.
Sure. Yeah, well, I'm no stranger to the law of attraction, spiritualism in general. If your viewers are curious about my story, I actually made a playlist on my YouTube channel called Kurt's Spiritual Autobiography, where I detail some of the weirder spiritual experiences that I've had, like, being visited by physical angels when I was 4, having an out-of-body experience when I was 5, all the ghosts and all that crazy stuff. And that's just the big stuff. So, I was shown early that there's more to this world than just the physical side of things. There absolutely is. And I've even been given, documented proof. So again, if your audience, if you guys are curious about said documented proof, there's that. None of this comes as a surprise to your audience, I'm sure. Everybody, I think we're all on the same page. But it seems like I was set up for this, right? This is a setup. Okay. I've been put in situations my whole life where I was able to develop certain talents, natural abilities, where by the time my forced spiritual awakening kicked off when I was 39, that I was able to do what I'm doing today. And so I know what I'm doing is exactly what I should be doing, coaching people professionally on their spiritual journey. And prolifically, I've coached over 6,000 people. And I love to talk science. I can talk about it all day long. I'm no stranger to engineering, science, physics. I know all about that stuff. I'm a college dropout who just kind of decided to go rogue, I guess, right? And learn about that stuff. And working with physicists too. So that's something that I've been up to. And I've got news for your audience. This is the age of Aquarius. We can have a rational dialogue about something that used to be called magic. Notice I said used to be called magic. They're not going to tell you this on television, of course, because the system, it's all controlled. We get that. Okay. But there is a very rigorous and hyper surprising conversation going on in conventional science. So conventional scientists today are talking about things that would blow your freaking mind, up to and including consciousness is fundamental. Wait a minute. So it's just some guy with a tinfoil hat in his basement saying this stuff. No. These are major scientists, physicists in charge of large university departments talking about this stuff. The basis of physical reality is information, which is to say mind. And I've heard physicists, mathematicians say that the universe is mind, which is something that Hermes Trismegistus said like 7,000 years ago. He was the guy that was the mentor to none other than Abraham, like the Abraham, right? The universe is mind. That is exactly what science is pointing at right now. Well, where did that come from? Consciousness. And these are big name scientists. Again, they're not going to tell you this on television. So that's the basic tenet of where I'm coming from. This is an extremely exciting time to be alive. They've demonstrated that we're living in a participatory universe. And that's actually something that I hit really hard with, like my coaching students, because I found that the biggest um, objection that people have to overcome, like the subconscious, it's programmed to be fear-based. The biggest objection for you to overcome there in your own subconscious programming is going to be, well, is this even real? Mm. Right? Yeah, it's real. And there's a lot of evidence. It's so overwhelmingly obvious that there is a crisis of cosmology in the scientific community about how the universe functions. So totally exciting time to be alive. Your body and your mind are manifesting equipment. We as humans are able to do things that not other animals can do, which is to actually have an effect on 3D physical reality. So again, just to bring this introduction full circle, where we started long ago was this is mysticism. It's some kind of magic, but it turns out magic is just science undiscovered. That's all it is. We can just explain it now. It's always been real.
Yeah. Well, and I think didn't the University of Virginia do a massive study on reincarnation?
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
I'm going to try to work with them, by the way. I don't know if it's going to happen. It's funny that you mentioned that, by the way, because I just partnered with a scientist, a physicist, who's one of my coaching students. And he's got connections to the University of Virginia. They're one of the only institutions in the world that take any of this stuff seriously, but they're good at it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like controlled experiments on the power of prayer, telepathy, consciousness, things like this. And with good reason.
Yeah.
That's another synchronicity, by the way.
That one,
the fact that you brought them up.
There you go. Yeah. I mean, I think it's so interesting because even I think the CIA released a document on manifestation. I know they didn't like term it manifestation, but essentially that's like what it was. And I mean, it's been coming up so much, right? That I'm reading a book that's talking about Atlantis and the technology of our body and the mind to manipulate matter and to build the pyramids and like how we abuse that power. And it's like, it's literally like beginning to repeat itself now. And like you said, I think a lot of us that are here now are here from a long time ago, right? Our souls were incarnated to be here to take part in this right now. And I think it is also a beautiful thing to question things because I've gone through that too, where I believe it like wholeheartedly, but there are moments I'm like, what if it's all fake, But then if I'm questioning that, I'm questioning all the other things we're told too. Right. So I think it's like a good thing to have the questions, but yeah, it's a really interesting time. And
well, this is why, like, I've made a point of like keeping records of all the experiences I've had. And I teach my students to do this. And it kind of started with, okay, I've got this friend. We've been friends for almost 30 years. And he went through your forced awakening template like I did too, right? It starts off extremely painfully. Some of your audience, maybe you know what I'm talking about. Same template that like Buddha, Eckhart Tolle, they went through. And I'm not even trying to compare myself to Eckhart Tolle, okay? But it's the template, it's the mechanism. So it starts with a very painful ego death process where it's like your higher self is going, it's time for you, motherfucker. You're the one right now, It's like you're being picked on, but you come out of it completely transformed. So same thing for him. His initiator, like what initiated his forced awakening was different, but same format. Okay. He comes out of it, just incredible telepathic gifts. I've never seen somebody as telepathic as he. My experience personally has been glimpses of telepathy. I mean, I know you can cultivate it. I just haven't bothered to do that. But intuition is where I operate from. And most of my students do too. But this guy, he hears shit in his head all day long. And I don't mean like a crazy psychopath weirdo, but you could be sitting across the table from him and he's telling you everything you're thinking. He's nuts. I've never seen. Okay. I get home one day. We used to be roommates. I get home one day. This is 20 years ago after his awakening. And there's a yellow piece of paper laying on the floor going into my room, and he wrote down all kinds of stuff that I said, things that I did, places I went, stuff my friend said that I was with. And we were miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have that piece of paper to this day. Now, the reason I'm telling you is we can stop and look at things like this, because my experience is not unique. I'm sure if we go, guys, that's proof, that's evidence, it's data, it's information, it's a real event. And that is exactly the way a scientist would look at something like that. I still have this document that my friend gave me. I have proof of telepathy. And I also have proof of intuition. So the intuition, the knowing that I experience, which, like I said, it seems to be more commonplace actually than telepathy. Most people think, oh, you're spiritual, everybody's telepathic. Well, it doesn't really work that way. It's
Mm-hmm.
usually that intuitive knowing
Like the
that just
feeling.
kind of is automated. Yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
just kind of happens. I started writing stuff down in a journal, the time, the date, what the information was that was coming with the intuitive experience, et cetera, et cetera. And it keeps happening. So this is what I'm trying to tell everybody. This is exactly the kind of thing, like the University of Virginia. This is what, or the CIA, this is what they do. You have an internal experience and you're relying on a person to tell you the truth or to accurately describe what their internal experience is. That is true, but it's what you call a soft science. Whereas like Newtonian physics is a hard science where we throw a ball down the street, a baseball, we know what's going to happen, right? That's a hard science. A soft science is like psychology or studying the paranormal, like this.
Mm-hmm.
If you guys get an intuitive sense about something, write it down in a journal and keep track, keep records. Because I'm not going to remember most of this stuff, but I got to tell you, I look back at this stuff and I go, yeah, all of this stuff did happen. So when you do a research study on something like this, all you need to do is have an experiment group and a control group. You have an experiment group where they are trained on cultivating these types of internal experiences. And all you got to do, there's the Heart Math Institute on YouTube. They've got some really cool techniques to cultivate connecting with your heart and listening to the intuitive messages that you receive there. They call it heart brain coherence. So just, check those guys out. So you've got the experiment group, and then you've got the control group where they don't do anything. And if you repeat this experiment 10 times and you get the same results every time, I think there's something going on there.
Mm-hmm.
So Rochelle, like for you, I'm trying really hard to convince you that this is real. I don't need to convince you that it's real, but
Yeah.
this is how I do that. This is how I instruct even my students. Okay, you can actually overcome even the ego-based doubts. You can give your mind an answer that even it is satisfied with. Wait, we documented this stuff. This is real. I've got hard evidence now.
Mm-hmm.
You can't actually say that there's no law of attraction, that there's not intuition, that there's not telepathy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's wild. My kids, so my daughter's 13, my son is 7, and my 7-year-old son, like I can't tell you the amount of times he's said something I was just thinking.
Right.
Like he'll come into the room and be like, "Here's your water. I thought you were thirsty." And like literally
Right.
right before he walked in, I was thinking in my head, "I wonder where my water is."
Right.
Like these little, and it happens all the time. My
Uh-huh.
daughter sees like ghosts and she'll see shapes and things like that, but I've never once, I think because I'm like growing in this spiritual journey, right? That I've never been like, "Oh, you don't see that," or whatever. Whereas like when I look back at my childhood, I don't even remember ever seeing anything, or for me it was always
Mhm.
feeling. So I was always confused because it wasn't like I didn't see something, I didn't hear something. It was just like a knowing. But it's so easy to
Right.
like brush that aside, right? So now that like now I'm in it, it is, I think it's a practice of feeling. And like you said, writing down, I've noticed with manifestation, when I write down like my little wins, then I can look back and be like, oh wow, like I am manifesting, even if I don't think that I,
Uh-huh. Right.
so you're definitely right in the fact of like writing it down, even if it seems insignificant or seems little, right? Then you can go back and be like,
Write
oh,
it
but I
down.
did manifest that thing. Like it actually
Hmm.
came through. Because if you don't, like you said, if you don't have the proof, your mind is going to convince you that you don't have it.
Right. And this isn't just, I don't know, new age hyperbole. This is what real researchers in this field are doing. All they're doing is asking a bunch of people, hey, what are you experiencing? And then they write it down. That's it. That is real science. And I guess that's what I'm imparting right now is there isn't anything unscientific about documentation. That is the most scientific. Again, it's a soft science. There's a hard science, there's soft science. It's not, we're not measuring wind speed or something like that, or particles hitting a screen, like if you're a researcher at CERN or something like that. It's a soft science. So you're going to rely on people's experience. Now, you could actually take this, you'll think this is interesting. You could actually take some of the stuff in a soft science like this and make it into an applied science, which is more of a hard science. It's less squishy, shall we say. So for example, they've done all kinds of, so back to the Heart Math Institute, they've done all kinds of studies on the brainwave states of monks when they're doing certain things internally. So for example, they'll take a monk, stick him in an MRI machine, a CAT scanner, and scan his brain waves. And this is how they actually discovered the gamma wave state. They didn't even know about this until they started studying monks. Like, how do these guys live to be so old? Why are they in a good mood all the time? How come they live to be 110? Okay, what gives? What is it, right? And that's where they started to make the connections between your heart and your brain and why that's so fundamental. And then you point at, again, Hermetic philosophy or Charles Hannell, the guy that wrote the Master Key System. He's always talking about that. That was over 100 years ago when he wrote that book. By the way, they tried to ban that book.
Master Key. Actually, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, the so-called elite, right? It's called the Master Key System. But same exact thing. We're all talking about the same thing. It's just today in science, we're actually proving it. And again, there is actual hard data on this stuff too. So it's actually really, really easy to overcome the objections of the ego when you consider the fact that this is real, there's evidence, and you can do it at home.
Yeah. So what do you think? Like, I mean, I feel like more of us are sort of waking up to this. There's more like podcasts like this, more conversations like this happening. I work at a bar as well, right? And even people that come in randomly, these conversations are coming up, right? So people are waking up to it. But it's like the masses are still, I feel like, blinded, or maybe it's just perception. I don't know. But it's like, how do we get like more and more? I mean, obviously having conversations like this, but it's just such an interesting topic. And I feel like once you see it, you almost like can't unsee it. It's like I walk around and now it's like, I question everything. Whereas like
I
if
tell
somebody
that to
says
people all the
something,
time.
what, just to question it
Once
or,
you see this,
oh
you
yeah.
can't
Oh,
unsee it. I say that
absolutely.
all the time. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I went to a concert like last year and they had everyone, they were handing out these like wristband things, right? Everyone was putting them on. And I was like watching, I was like, nobody's questioning it. Everyone's just throwing it on their wrist. You don't even know what this thing is.
Right.
I just like put it in my bag. I was like, I'm not putting this thing on, but we got down and it was like a light show. But like, I feel like the fact that like nobody questioned it. Everyone just immediately put it on because somebody handed
Right.
it to them, and it was just like the idea of like, that's kind of what we as a society do, right? It's like, we're told something, we believe it blindly. And the ones that question it are told they're crazy or they're wrong or things like that. So it's just an
Yeah. The
interesting time.
CIA popularized the term conspiracy theory. I mean, it was kind of already thought of long before that, but nobody ever used it, heard of it. It was, obscure. The CIA, they were openly, they'll tell you, yeah, we did that. We popularized it. We did that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so base and childish. Oh, you're stupid. That's a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
They stick
Yeah.
their tongue out at you. And I'm over here going, yeah, but 2 + 2 is 4. Or I'm just asking a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And to your story about the wristband, yeah, they've done all kinds of studies where they'll have a guy sitting in a room hooked up to some electrodes, and what appears to be going on is people in the control booth push a button and he gets electrocuted. Like he gets a little shock. Now he's faking it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not really getting a shock. But here's what they did. They brought, 10 people in, right? And they had a guy in a lab coat looking very official. But what does that mean? Just because he's wearing a lab coat, what is he supposed to be, a cop or a judge or something? Who's this guy? But nobody ever questions when he tells each of the 10 participants that come into the room to push the button and shock the guy in the booth in the other room, right? And they don't tell the 10 people that it's a science experiment. We're just seeing if you'll do it, right? Mm-hmm. And the scientist will tell the person to shock the guy, and they go, well, it looks like it's hurting him. And the scientist goes, oh, no, it's fine. Just keep doing it. But he looks like an authority figure is the point. Like, oh, he's the guy that's in charge. And so people just, without even thinking it, it's just like the guy handing out the wristbands. Oh, he has some kind of authority here or something. Well, does he have a badge? Does he have a gun? Does he have paper? No, he's just the guy saying he's the authority. And I mean, that's not necessarily bad. There can be somebody who says they're an authority on something, and maybe there are, but people don't question it. They just go along with it. And out of the 10 subjects that they tested in this experiment, only 2 people questioned. The other 8, they just kept shocking the guy until the guy like passed out or something, right? And even one of them was like, are you sure? It looks like I'm really hurting him. And the scientist would just get huffy, do it, right? And they would go, oh, okay, you're the boss. Why? Why are you the boss? Now, I've noticed this pattern in nature. I call it the 80-20 rule. And I don't know if I'm right about this. It's just something I noticed. It's my hypothesis, but there does seem to be this split in civilization. And I mean, anybody in you or your audience should be able to see what I'm talking about, because that's exactly what we're talking about. There is a small number of people that actually think about things, and then the masses, they just kind of do whatever. So 80% of the population, approximately, that's going to be your plumbers and truck drivers and farmers and trash guys and teachers and police and ICE, whatever, right? Banker, people that just, they don't really think about things. They just kind of do what they're told to do, but they are the worker ants that build things too, right? They build the roads, they build the construction, the financiers, the banks that fund the thing. Everybody's working together on Team Human, right? To build civilization, to create all of these amazing structures, roads, all the infrastructure that we all get to enjoy, food that you eat, everything, all of it. It's all these people that I call the 80%ers, who, by the way, some of them should probably be paid more than they are, by the way. Right? I think a lot of them are underappreciated, people that do the really hard jobs like farmers, people like that, right? And then you've got the 20% where it's people like us, hosting a podcast, writing books, intellectual conversation, art, things like this, science. Why? I don't know. But I see that everywhere. You see it in nature too. Like you got a lion pride, right? And 10 males, 10 females. All the females want to get with the one or two like dominant males, and the other 8 lions don't get to participate in reproduction, right? Like apes, same thing in the animal kingdom. You see that everywhere. Why is there this split? Why is there like an excess of kind of worker bees, worker ants? Well, maybe it's because if we didn't have that, then you wouldn't have the ability to have infrastructure civilization. Maybe there's a higher consciousness that's in control here. And I think this is something that'll resonate with you. You know, the earth is an organism, which is a part of a larger organism of the solar system, which is part of a larger organism called the galaxy. Everybody knows that's how this works. Consciousness compartmentalizes. So maybe something else is making these decisions from a higher level. Maybe that's what it is. Do you need or want to awaken those masses of people? Because if you had 100% of the population doing the things you and I are doing, nothing would ever get done. Mm. Nobody's going to put food on the table. Nobody's going to fix the potholes. Nobody's going to want to be a school teacher or any of these. I don't want to call it lower level because that makes it sound like it's not important. It's extremely important, but they're not going to be doing the stuff you and I are doing. So maybe that's by design.
Yeah.
Now it comes with its problems too, which is what you're talking about a second ago, because you can get them to do anything you want them to do. You can trick them into doing just about anything and they won't question it. So I don't know that the solution is necessarily going to be to wake everybody up. I don't know if that's possible. It seems to me that's something that's built into nature, this 80-20 split. I think what really needs to happen is we need better leaders.
Probably.
Yeah.
Well, it has me think like, you know, if you think about like Atlantis, right, where they say that time their mind, they were able to build things and change mass and matter and communicate telepathically and things like that, right? Of course, there was a downfall because there was a majority, obviously, of the population that misused that power, right? And so then you, like, as you're talking about now, you have 80% of people that are doing all this, like the manual labor and those types of things. Part of me is like, do we need infrastructure? Like, do we need the roads? Can't we just like all live on the planet, like, you know, off in the forest and things like that? But that's where that the 20% gets a little because I think we
totally
do
cerebral.
need those things. Exactly. Right. We'd all, my mind is like, well, can't we just all be in peace somewhere off in like some island somewhere? But it doesn't work like that, you know? But yeah, to your point, I think that's where my mind went. It's just, maybe it's just providing that contrast of like, we can't all be, you know, have those telepathic psychic powers, because then even then there's going to be some sort of misuse of power, because everything is duality, right? You have to have the contrast, the light and the dark. And so it's just, I guess sometimes it's
awakened
like,
if you didn't have unawakened.
Exactly. Yeah.
By the way, I personally recognize the fact that we could live in a highly technologically advanced civilization with heated and air-conditioned homes and all the food that you could possibly want to eat, entertainment, television, cars to drive, vehicles to fly around the world in, space travel, anything you want to talk about with harmony in the environment. You could do that. We don't have to do industrialization and the current way of life that we live, this technologically advanced civilization, and destroy the environment at the same time. Those two things do not have to be the same. That's a lie. And that's what we're not being told. No, there is a way to be technologically advanced and enjoy these things without war, destruction, polluting the environment, screwing with the economy all the time, et cetera, et cetera. But, you know, the powers that be, they don't let us have those technologies.
I was reading a book, Dolores Cannon, The Convoluted Universe. I don't know if you've read that
Mhm.
one, but in the beginning, she's talking about, or what was channeled through one of the past life regressions that she was doing, was that Earth was like originally created. There was no like human life. Like we're not native to Earth. Like
Right.
we were other beings that came here to experience pleasure and emotion because that's not something all beings can experience. And then they ended up staying. So it's like
Mhm.
sometimes when I think about that, it's maybe we're sort of like addicted to that aspect, which is why we're here, right? Like on this planet. And it's just like a theory. But it sort of makes sense why we struggle so much with addiction, with the chaos, with
Mhm.
pain and suffering and all these things that we don't actually have to be constantly experiencing.
Right.
But again, then I think about it, we came here knowing full well our souls knew we were going to go through that. We knew we were going to
Mhm.
experience that for a very specific reason. So it's, yeah,
How
I don't
can
know.
you
It's
know what you want if
interesting.
you don't know what you don't want?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
This is what I
definitely.
tell my students all the time. I go, you are a non-dual being, consciousness, inhabiting a body and mind of duality, living in a world of duality. The non-dual consciousness is the player of the video game, the computer programmer, right? And you're going to have to pick one. So you live in duality, you got positive experiences and you got negative experiences. You're going to have to pick one.
Mhm.
And you're never going to completely end negative experiences. And I don't think you would want to, actually. I think what drives us as humans is the desire to have something better. Like the ego, I don't perceive the ego as necessarily useless. Bad, perhaps.
Mhm.
Not even necessarily bad, but it is negatively programmed. Well, you can reprogram it to be, instead of primarily negative, you can program it to be primarily positive. We live in duality. So you're going to have to pick one. So which one are you going to pick? Well, you're going to
Mhm.
pick positive, but you just don't want to bypass the negative experiences either, because we learn and grow from those. There is no eliminating that from your life completely, but you can actually cause yourself to have less of those types of experiences. That is true. If, as Dr. Joe Dispenza said, you reprogram your personality and you'll reprogram your personal reality. You may
Mhm.
find more joy and satisfaction in your life. So, remembering who you are as consciousness, that's step one. You're a creator, and starting with your own internal narrative. And to your point, I think that's kind of the whole idea. I think as a spiritual being, whatever the higher self is up to, whoever you are beyond the body and the mind, which chooses to keep incarnating down here again and again and again, I think that is exactly what it wants. It wants experiences, good, bad, everything in between. It likes that. And it doesn't mind, because where it exists is a place where there is no duality. It's
Mhm.
that pure peace, which the mind would call good, but good is part of duality. So, this energetic state that your higher self exists in, and this is a purely spiritual conversation, it's not really good either. It's not bad, but it's not good. So, from the point of view of the higher self, these are just all events, which to the ego sounds, or if you go down this philosophical rabbit hole, it sounds, I don't know. It just doesn't make any sense. It seems illogical, because why would you pick negative experiences? Why would you ever do that? it sounds morbid to the ego. I guess that's the word
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to think of a second ago. But to the higher self, it all just is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's fascinating to the higher self. And the higher self, too, you got to remember, it realizes that it is eternal and it can't be damaged. And you are too. And that's that part of this journey as spiritual people where we're always walking that fine line between two worlds. I think like Eckhart Tolle, he refers to it as you've got the horizontal dimension of duality where, yeah, there's pain and there's pleasure. We try to minimize pain and maximize pleasure. And then there's the horizontal dimension of non-duality, which is the isness. And for you to live holistically, perhaps, is the solution. For you to remember who you are as that vertical dimension of pure being, that way, any negative experiences that come into your sphere, maybe they're not quite so triggering. And maybe you actually get something out of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's all lessons. Yeah, I've learned to sort of like when I feel anxious in my body or in my mind, instead of before I used to be like, and maybe it's that like going back to that law of attraction where we think that we have to like never think like negative and never like experience negative. Now it's like, that's really interesting that my body's reacting this way. And I think it's sort of trying to take the higher self perspective, not like dismissing what my body's feeling, not dismissing my thoughts, but more so being curious of like, okay, my body's
Yes.
reacting that way, but it doesn't have to be my reality. I can still do the thing and have awareness that my body's freaking out and also
Mm-hmm.
be like, okay, I hear you, I see you, but we're not going to take it off with it right now.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Curious is the word I was thinking of as you were
Mm-hmm.
saying that.
Mm-hmm.
That's exactly, that's the best way I can describe it to people.
Yeah.
You look at these negative experiences with curiosity. It's kind of like so here's what I tell my manifesting students: 80 to 90% of your manifesting game is your Zen game, which is going to be traditional Zen spiritualism, actual, genuine spiritualism, which
Mm-hmm.
is non-duality, consciousness, being. It's energetic. You don't think your way there. It's not thinking. Okay, when you allow that spaciousness into your life situation as a way of life, eventually you feel much more in line with what you were just describing a second ago, where you're able to look at experiences like that. And here's an example that I always use. It's like your physical body is an apartment and you're living there with a noisy roommate called the mind.
Hmm.
So you're in your room and your roommate is in the other room. So that's your internal experience. It's very hard to explain this to people that have never experienced this before. It's like I'm here and I'm not triggered, but there is a negative emotion in my bubble, in my sphere. You experience the negative emotion or anxiety or whatever as like separate from you
Mm-hmm.
somehow. It's like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to
Yeah.
describe.
And I feel like it's hard. It's at least for me, it was a process to get to that point where I could separate those things because for me, I'm very emotional. And, I think I started my journey about 6 years ago and it's only taken me until like the last like year or two to actually really fully be able to get to that point where I can feel my emotions, but know that I don't have to be that. Like I can
Right.
witness it and have that curiosity.
Yes.
But my question too, like when it comes to manifestation, like because I've gone through Manifestation Babe Academy, MBA, I've done like Lacey Phillips, the To Be Magnetic, if you've heard of those things. And it's very much, manifesting from our subconscious, right? And so even, like I said, I'm still learning, right? All these things because I know that my physical reality isn't yet what I want it to be or desire it to be or perceive that it can be. So I know that there's some blocks like underneath there. But when it comes to like the law of attraction and manifestation, how are we like really manifesting? Is it the subconscious? Is it the thoughts, a combination? Because I feel like for me, like law of attraction, when I see that, I 100% believe like in law of attraction, but I also think has to be the underneath work in order to really get there. So I don't know if you can touch on that maybe.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Your feelings create your physical reality. Very simple.
Mm.
The subconscious is linked directly to divine mind, the mental universe, which, if your audience is curious about what that is, a quick side note, it's basically the vacuum of space. It's the fabric of space, which appears as a vacuum, but even conventional physics will tell you that there's something there. It's a vacuum, but it's not. Space bends around objects. That's why there is gravity. So they know something is going on. And it's gotten to the point where they have started referring to it as information, which sounds abstract, and it is. They're saying that physical reality comes from that information. It comes from a void. And it's just data. It's just information. It's mind. Very interesting. And again, these are serious people. These are big name scientists. Okay. So your subconscious is directly linked to that, kind of like the way like an internet modem or a cable box is linked to a network. So the modem is your subconscious. And you kind of wag the dog. So again, we humans are one of the only animals on earth capable of creating emotions out of you could sit on the couch and decide to make yourself angry, or I'm going to make myself feel appreciation, or I'm going to make myself feel caring, or I'm going to make myself feel excited, or I'm going to make myself feel however I'm going to feel when I win the lottery, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can actually make yourself do that. We're one of the only animals that can do that on the face of the earth. And through a repeated practice of doing this, you actually start to believe it. Now, what's happening is you're dumping consciousness into the emotion. So the three-part triune being, body, mind, soul, the engineering is the soul, which is primarily consciousness, is the tank. The mind is the engine, which is hooked up to the gas tank. So consciousness, whatever you focus on, becomes your reality. It's what animates those emotions. It's the very fuel source of that. So I guess what we're talking about right now is more technique. Now, it also really helps if you look at your own fears, you write them down, journal them out, so that you're aware of them, so that you know that they're there. You're clear about the things that you're afraid of, lack, right? Here's something I tell my coaching students. If you start a business and you get a sale, how do you feel when you take the money? You deliver the product or service, they put the money in your hand. What do you feel? Most people say, I feel awkward. Right. So there are emotional patterns in addition to thought patterns. And thought patterns usually are a product of emotional patterns. Thought patterns, the conscious mind in your third eye. Emotional patterns, the subconscious mind. So again, what we've discussed up to this point is cultivating emotional experiences and how those emotions are linked directly to the mental universe. The mental universe causes physical manifestation. So doing these kind of visualizations, and this is why you see law of attraction gurus telling you to do that. You can use your conscious mind as though it were a gatekeeper. It's the gatekeeper of the subconscious mind. And you can use the conscious mind to not allow any junk in or out of the subconscious. Cultivate those emotional experiences, visualizations, and these kinds of things. So that's kind of one set of principles that you'll see people talking about when they're talking about technique, with the law of attraction, visualizations, and whatnot. The other set of principles that you'll see being discussed is the journaling, like I just talked about, working through your fears. Write them down and look at them. And when you do that, you really got to laugh at it. Like how ridiculous some of this stuff is. Money is evil and bad, and I don't deserve it. Who said? You know what would happen if everybody in the world had $1 million? I bet you there wouldn't be any war, crime, violence. I bet you all that stuff would go away overnight. So I think lack of money is the root of all evil. Greed is a problem, yes. So don't shame yourself over something like that. So there's kind of two ways to work the subconscious mind. There's the visualizations, and then there's being aware of your own subconscious programming and realizing that thoughts are simply objects of consciousness. Again, going back to step one, you are the programmer of the computer, the mind being the computer. So what does that make you? Well, body, mind, soul. Oh, I'm the soul. What's that? Consciousness. So 80 to 90% of your manifesting game is your Zen game, increasing your consciousness, cultivating a lifestyle of living in the moment, right? Like Eckhart Tolle says, the power of now. You read that book, Untethered Soul, John Kabat-Zinn, watch a bunch of Rupert Spira videos, get into that stuff. Slow down, build spaciousness into your life so that you can look at your thoughts as the looker of them. And you don't need to do anything about the negative thought or emotional patterns that are coming up. You just need to acknowledge them and say, no, thank you. I actually am going to say this instead. You just kind of switch. And last, and by the way, this was totally a crash course. So, I don't know, maybe your audience, maybe they'll want to go back and listen to the last 5 minutes, go watch some of my YouTube videos. But I mean, you asked me, how do I deal with these emotions? I want to manifest more, a better situation for myself. How do I get my emotions to do that in spite of how I'm living, right? And it really is an art. It's a study. I can't just really give you everything in 5 minutes. So there you go. There's a good crash course. But I'll tell you what, this will make it all make sense to you. Here's the last point. Don't make the object of your desire the goal. Make the goal getting yourself to a point where doing this kind of reprogramming work that I just gave you the crash course on, make that the goal, where doing this kind of reprogramming is reflexive. It's like when the doctor smacks your knee with the little hammer, or when somebody cuts you off in traffic and you want to flip them off or something like that. I could think of a better example. But the reflexive reaction, think of anything where it's a reaction. If somebody says something rude to you, how would you react? Like an uncontrolled reflex or a reaction, right? Or if somebody throws something at you, your reflex, your reaction is to get out of the way. Okay, I want you to make this reprogramming that I just quickly described. I want you to learn it and make it a way of life. Make it so that it's reflexive. You just do it. You remember who you are. You're conscious of the negative programming, and you intentionally counter it with a positive visualization or a thought. Make it reflexive. Make that the goal, getting yourself to the point where this is a way of life. And all of the things that you want to manifest, Rochelle, they'll happen. I promise.
Yeah.
And I can prove it.
Yeah. Well, and I also think a lot of times when we're manifesting something, it's more so just the feeling, right? It's like, it's not,
Yes.
I mean, for me, it's always comes down to freedom, no matter what it is, whether it's travel or money or like whatever, it's because I just want to be free.
Yes.
Right. That's the feeling. Peace.
That's my
freedom.
go-to emotion.
Freedom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I could talk to
I
you
love,
all day,
yeah.
dude. I
I
swear,
know
you
that's
and I are like on the same page here.
right. I think so. But yeah, that's what it always comes down to is I'm like, when I think about it, if I'm like frustrated about money or something, I'm like, what is the thing that I actually want here? Because it's not the actual
Right.
physical money. It's
Yes.
what it gives me. Right. And so I
Yes.
think that reframe is really powerful. I do have a question though. Is there any additional or anything extra that we have to do? Like say if we come from trauma, because I think that can be really confusing, right? Because the body
Right.
is reacting in a certain way because it feels
Yep.
unsafe. I always say, I think the first thing is to know that you're safe and to find
Yes.
a way to feel safe before you can
hmm
begin to actually do the work. But
Yep.
if there's any other like insider tips that you have.
Totally. That's going to be the journaling that we just kind of talked about. So there's two
Mhm.
sets of techniques to deal with the emotions and to reprogram new ones. And that's one of them is, well, what's already in there? What have I got going on in here in my subconscious? I'll even like people that have some really bad trauma, I'll tell them, go talk to a psychologist, get a therapist. I encourage my students to do that.
Mhm.
Abso-freaking-lutely. And just don't pay attention to and I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be mean. I'm not trying to make anybody wrong, but there's kind of this well-meaning, but kind of fruity loop, if you will, like these strange healing modalities that you'll see, like kind of the pop culture version of spiritualism, healing and shadow work and all of these kinds of things, which I've spoken to psychologists about this stuff. If you look at the things they're telling you to do, they would never work. They'll make things worse. Guys, talk to a real therapist. Let's get real here. This is the most amazing time to be alive. Humans have actually figured out effective ways to deal with trauma. So the online gurus, again, wonderful people. I'm not here to put anybody down, but guys, it's not going to do us any good not to be honest and real about this stuff. A lot of that stuff, it's so bypassy and invalidating. And all it does is keep you stuck in the same cycles. Talk to a real psychologist, please.
Yeah.
Do
Do some
yourself a favor.
EMDR.
Right. In conjunction with the mindfulness, the yoga, meditation, the reprogramming, right? Really work those things out. I did. I had childhood trauma. I had narcissistic parents, and that was really tough to deal with, but I did it and it worked. It worked. I have much stronger boundaries, and I've noticed I get less and less and less toxic people in my life.
Mhm.
Interesting. It worked.
Mhm.
It worked.
Yeah. I went to therapy for years and I did EMDR and everything. And there came a point where my therapist said too, though, she was like, there comes a point where you almost rely on the therapy when you've been through some
Mhm.
trauma, right? It becomes like almost like a coping mechanism. And so she literally like broke up with me essentially. She's like, if you
Yeah.
keep coming here, you're gonna keep like replaying
Yeah.
it. And I was like, okay, so that's sort of for me in my journey. I did the traditional therapy for like 2, 3 years, and then it ended, and that's when I sort of found my spiritual way. But I think
Yes.
going through all of that allowed me to know that I'm safe. Like you said, I think boundaries,
Mhm.
if therapy for nothing else, like learning how to actually reinforce boundaries and to have somebody to go to when you are feeling like you can't, or just somebody to talk that out and
Mhm.
teach you the tips and ways to have effective boundaries is like worth it all. Cause that's, I think
Absolutely.
there's, think about astrology whenever I think about, spirituality. I mean, it's all Pisces energy and Libra
Mhm.
and all these
Mhm.
things that are like very codependent and people pleasing. And, if you can't set boundaries, then you're just giving everything away.
Everything. And here's something, I think this is the cherry on top. There's a reason every therapist and or psychologist I've ever spoken to, they'll always recommend mindfulness meditation. So it's now fully accepted in conventional psychology because it works. And I implore you and your audience, and I don't think I have to implore you to do
Mhm.
this, you're already doing it, but please, please, please learn non-duality traditional spiritualism, right? Go read Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul. An Eckhart Tolle video a day keeps the ego away.
Mm.
So to rework the mind, if you've got some serious trauma, most people don't need to do that. Most of the audience, you guys, you don't need to do that. But some of you do, and that's why we're having this conversation. Some people have some pretty bad trauma. So yes, go work it out with a psychologist or something, but everybody, the people who do or don't need therapy, you're not your mind in the first place. That is the basic tenet. I even look at this. I bought this bumper sticker to show my students. This is so well known, the teachings of non-duality, that they even put it on a flippin' bumper sticker. It says Zen Buddhism, don't even think about it. Right. The name of the first chapter of Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, is called You Are Not Your Mind.
Mm.
So even all the negative thoughts that are there in your mind, it's not you.
Mm-hmm.
Eckhart Tolle, he'll even tell people, because your average person, they don't have a lot of trauma, and he can sense that from the average person in his audience, and he'll just tell them, you don't even need to do that. You're none of these things that your mind is telling you. You are not a thinker. Here's something I saw Rupert Spira say the other day. He's probably he's as big or almost as well known as like Eckhart Tolle, right? Teacher of non-duality. Can a thought listen to our conversation? Can a thought feel pain? Can a thought experience anything? No, it is just an object of consciousness. So whatever the trauma is going on in your mind, however it is, you guys listening decide you need to deal with it. This teaching of non-duality, of consciousness, it'll serve every single one of you, especially the people who are getting therapy. It'll make it work even better. You aren't even the trauma. That's not you. The real you is formless and timeless. It's the silent witness. That's the real you. The real you is free from pain. That's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that for me in my own journey too, releasing those labels, right, of like the victim or whatever that is also freeing, because when you're like, when that defines you, right, then you are
Mm-hmm.
what you think, right, or you are what you feel, or your reality reflects that. And so like walking around being pegged as the victim, right, you become it. And it's not
Right.
to dismiss any trauma or anything that's
Right.
happened to anybody, but I think it's
Yep.
really important to be very careful about how we're using our words, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You
But
don't
there,
want to bypass the trauma,
yeah,
but it still isn't who you really
yeah,
are.
yeah. There was, I think it was Michael Singer. I think it was Untethered Soul or the Surrender Experiment, but he was talking about the mind, right? And it just like got to a point where he was like, this person that's always talking in my head, like it's not going to
Uh-huh.
stop. So I don't have to listen to them. I
Yeah.
think that's where once you have that realization, it's not always in every moment I'm like disregarding my mind,
I
but there
even,
comes a point where you think about it. You're like, huh, you can sit
dude,
here.
I have my coaching students name their ego,
Mm, yeah.
right?
Yeah. My
Like,
son, he we call him the Hulk, but like when, because he's the sweetest, most loving boy, but he'll have moments where he's about to freak out and everybody can see it, right? And so it's just like that's what I'll tell him. I'm like, is the Hulk gonna come out right now, or am I gonna keep talking to Christian? And he
yeah,
kind of giggles
see?
about it and he's like, oh no, Christian will stay here, because we just,
Right.
we give it a name, and I don't ever want him to feel like he's wrong for being angry or he's wrong for his emotions, because
Right.
I completely validate them. But
Yep.
I think just having that named, right,
Yes.
allows him to see that that's not his true self, that
Right.
is a piece of him, yes,
Mhm.
but it's not who he has to be. So,
Exactly. You got to work it holistically. The question of who am I is not as simple as it sounds. You are a person. Yes, you're immortal. There's a personality, ego, the separate self. It's going to be there doing what it's doing. And you are a soul consciousness. So I guess it depends. What are we talking about? To say, who am I? It's a conversation. It really is.
mm-hmm.
And it's a
Yeah.
worthwhile one.
It's so interesting. So like when you talk about like spiritual bypassing, because I don't think that we can ever, I mean, I guess like what is your definition of that? And then because I don't think we can really do it because it always comes back, right? Like you can't actually like disregard the
Right.
negative, the darkness or
Yeah.
the, you know, the trauma and things because it's just going to get bigger. But I would just
Mhm.
be curious to see what your definition of that is and how we can not do it.
Well, it's basically just gaslighting yourself. You're telling yourself that you're a failure for feeling a negative emotion. The again, the common theme, the kind of the pop culture messaging that you get from the internet is unfortunately going to be kind of along that line, kind of in that vein where it's, oh, only happy feelings are allowed, only ever. And if you get triggered, if you get angry, you're not spiritual. Well, spiritual isn't good. It's not bad. Where I think we're all in agreement that it's not bad, but it's not good either. Spiritual is non-duality, always has been, always will be.
Mhm.
So, and I understand why, and most of the people, by the way, most people that engage in spiritual bypassing, I want to be clear, I don't perceive the, like I said, the kind of pop culture messaging that you see about spiritualism as nefarious. I see most of it is actually innocent and well intentioned. And I've even got an analogy I can share with you about what I think is going on with people. Because most people, I think what they want to do is help you. They want you to feel better. They see people struggling, and instead of dealing with the sophisticated conversation like the one that you and I are having, they just want they think the action is one dimensional. Like, oh, they feel bad, it needs to be good. But it's evolved into kind of a monster today where that's the kind of messaging that you get from people is, oh, we're going to make sure you feel good only ever. And that's even been politicized. I mean, cancel
Mhm.
culture, you know, this kind of thing, college campuses, everybody knows what I'm talking about as soon as I say that. And it's not even realistic to expect that. There's going to be struggles. You know, there's a book I have my students read by a guy named Mark Manson. It's called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Mhm. Read that
And
one.
this is the teaching. It's this teaching of acceptance. There's gonna be challenges. And I mean, that's it in a nutshell. Spiritual bypassing is really just invalidating the human experience. You're gonna have struggles and challenges. You're gonna get mad, sad, happy, and whatever. And if you get triggered, you're not a failure, dude. You're not bad for getting mad. And by the way, the less that you gaslight yourself for feeling these emotions, the less intense these emotions get over time. I've changed so much in the last 5 years. You know, I'll see somebody maybe in the comments of one of my video throwing stones at me or something. And 5 years ago, I used to get kind of ticked, you know, but I've done all this internal work and now I just kind of don't care anymore. Like, ah, that's just your opinion. So obviously it worked. I've allowed myself, I don't guilt trip myself about being a human. And here's another thing. Sometimes when we get mad about stuff, you should probably be getting mad about it. Like,
Mhm.
what if somebody tries to scam you? What are you going to do? Be like, oh, this is great. Oh, bless them.
Yeah.
No, who does that?
Yeah.
So here's my analogy about the culture online that produces this bypassing. Most of it is well intentioned. I once hired a handyman. True story. He comes over. He's driving a nice pickup. He's got a nice outfit, nice clothes. I mean, he's not like wearing a suit. It's like, you know, like a flannel shirt and jeans, but they're not all torn up. And he's not driving a dumpy pickup. You know, he doesn't look like like a scam artist, like your typical contractor that's going to rip you off. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He had like a nice tool belt and he was a nice man. Okay. He gets to work. Oh my God. I watched him work for about an hour and I was like, oh shit, I got to get him out of here. Oh man. He put the towel bar on all crooked and he put like a bunch of extra holes in the wall. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this guy knows what he's doing, man. And I felt kind of bad, but so I kind of I gave him some money and I was like, oh, you know what? I'm all out of money. Sorry about that. I'll let you know when I need the rest of the stuff done. And I sent him away. Now, he's a great guy. He just wants to help. But when you look at how he's trying to help you, that's why I'm always warning my students about your kind of, and again, I'm not trying to be mean, but kind of the run of the mill spiritual gurus on YouTube and stuff like that, that are giving you all
Mm-hmm.
these weird, like healing modalities and stuff that you got to do, which again turn out to be incredibly invalidating. No psychologist would tell you to do it. I call them the helpful handymen when I see one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
Really nice people, but oh God, guys, watch out.
Mm-hmm.
They're the helpful handymen.
Yeah. Do you think that like beginning phase of that, like I have to think positive, or maybe the misunderstanding of law of attraction is like a natural progression of the spiritual journey?
Well, of
Because
course it is.
yeah, because I was say I was
Yeah,
definitely there where I was like the quick fix, right? We want it to happen now. We want it
yeah,
fast and we want to be healed. And
right. I want the switch to flip. Abraham
mm-hmm,
Hicks calls it pure positive energy, the soul,
mm-hmm,
pure positive energy, the vortex, pure positive energy. That's what you are.
yeah,
And that is an actually a very accurate to singularity. It's infinite. It's purely positive. So you're the awakening of consciousness is trying to suck you in an upward direction. Of course, you want to experience more joy. Of course, you're going to be inclined to do that. And like I said earlier, you live in duality. You got to pick one, negative or positive. Which one are you going to pick?
mm-hmm, yeah,
So there is that inclination, but on your way up the ladder, be realistic and just take your time.
mm-hmm,
You got years left. You got many, many lifetimes. Life
yeah,
is eternal.
yep, yeah. And I think I don't know. I think we see people who are more progressed in their journey and we think that it happened overnight, and
Right.
it's like we just I don't know. I know my energy moves fast. And so in the beginning of my journey, I was like, no, I want all this now. Right. And it just, the
Uh-huh.
universe has a
Well,
funny way of being like, no, it's not going to work that
the
way.
ego does that. It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
It's like a bratty little kid. I want it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And some people get the perception that a spiritual awakening is like a checklist and we're going to get this all wrapped up and we're going to get this all taken care of and all squared away. And then we're going to go back to what we were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no,
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 that
this is the
spiritual
life.
awakening I feel like is so painful because you have to face yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you don't face yourself, you're not awakening.
Yep.
And that I think is the hardest part of like actually looking at all of your shadows and being like,
All
oh
of it.
shit,
Mm-hmm.
I got to
Yeah,
work on
that's
all of
real
this
shadow
stuff.
work. Just
Yeah.
acknowledging the negativity that's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. This has been so fascinating. I mean, I love all things manifestation and law of attraction and spirituality and things like that. I think like you said, we have so many lifetimes and I don't think this one lifetime anyone's ever going to get there, I mean maybe someone, but not most of us. But it's just like such a journey and
Well, if it
it's
makes you or your audience feel any better, even Eckhart Tolle still experiences challenges.
mm, yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And he's like the
Well,
modern day Buddha. So, guys,
right?
just get started.
Yeah.
Don't worry about time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and thank you for sharing your tips because I think that is so helpful in that, manifestation process and just the beginning, that journey of like you said, making it faster, right? Where like now I feel like I still have work to do, but that when I get triggered now, I almost get a little excited because I'm like, ooh, like I have,
Yeah, I
it's
get to
showing me what
deal
I have
with
to work
this.
on. And I know the tools now to work on it,
Mm-hmm.
So it
It
does
does speed up
become,
with time.
yeah.
It
Well,
does. I don't know
it
if you've noticed
has.
that.
Oh yeah, for sure. In the
Yeah.
beginning, I mean, it would take me like weeks to cycle through something, right? And
Right.
now I'm like, now it's maybe a day or two, or
And
sometimes
I
if I'm lucky, a
manifest
little.
faster now too.
Yeah,
So there is that. I don't want to
yeah,
discourage anybody. It does
yeah,
speed up.
yeah.
It does.
Well, it's become more fun. In the beginning, it
Hmm.
wasn't so much,
Yeah,
but
I agree.
it gets there. So anyone listening, like, hang in there, right?
Yep.
It's gonna start
100%.
moving. But well, how can everyone find you and how can they work with you? And then if there's anything we didn't talk about today that you want to really just make sure, the audience takes with them.
Sure. Best way to find me, two places. YouTube, New World All Star. All Star is one word, ALLSTAR. My website, same thing, New World All Star. And there's links to all my other social media. Just hop on there. There's multiple playlists. If you're just interested in law of attraction, I got that. If you're just interested in general spiritualism, I got that. So YouTube is the best place, or my website. As far as things to cover, I don't think so. I think I could talk to you all day long, though.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I know I'm even like thinking now of things that I wanted to like touch on that we were talking about, but
Yeah, we could do a
because it's
follow
just,
up.
yeah, yeah, for sure. That would be fun. That'd be good. All right. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure.